The theme for this year's International Youth Day is Safe Spaces for Youth. The day was observed on Sunday. However, for one rising star in South African academia, the day means women and girls need to be better protected. CGTN's Yolisa and Njamela has that story.
30-year-old Digeledi Mukwena is from South Africa's economic hub, Gauteng. She grew up in a township called Sebokeng. Her background is typical of many young South Africans growing up in townships, less affluent areas of this country, steeped in various social challenges. Her parents, however, managed to invest in her education. Mukwena is now pursuing a PhD at the University of Pretoria. She's one of at least 200 young people from 44 African countries currently undertaking a civic leadership program under the Obama Foundation. She tells us how inspiring it is to be one of the young people in this program.
The idea of connecting young people, empowering them, inspiring them, and all of that happened in the space of 5 days. Perfectly so, in the most, wow, I don't know, I'm like losing English at this moment, but they managed to achieve that. The inspirational part was they managed to do that by bringing in a number of speakers, right? People who are in various leadership positions. The ability to actually achieve what it sets out to do, which was the idea of sort of connecting young people, right, particularly in the continent. And it's not just here, because apparently this is the first program here. Those conversations that we were listening to on stage really did what it was meant to do, which is to ignite this idea of inspiration.
As part of the program, Mukwena has met many other young inspirational Africans.
Amazing young Africans who are doing phenomenal things in their communities.
Mukwena's focus of her PhD is in politics. She's adamant, however, that there are other ways of being a leader in a society without necessarily being a politician.
Through my work, through at least the route that I want to take, you can actually influence policy, right, and all of those aspects. But also at that particular space, I then started thinking actually about how about actively leading. It doesn't have to be in politics, it doesn't have to be in parliament, but really finding ways of actively leading in the ways that this man managed to, like through social movements that actually did so much on the ground.
So, in light of International Youth Day's theme, Safe Spaces for Youth, we ask her what safe spaces mean for her.
I think as a young person who, one, is female, who's a woman, when you talk about safe spaces, I think it's the most obvious one is addressing issues of gender-based violence, right? When you think about a safe space, is ultimately creating a conditions that is going to re-alter our world, right? Change our world in ways that, one, will certainly end inequalities that we face today, will certainly end injustices, right? And a safe space would be a just world.
Mukwena and the rest of the young people on the Obama Foundation Leadership Program will be trained and supported so as to create positive change in their communities.
At least 70% of Africa's population is younger than 35. Many of them face many challenges ranging from unemployment to limited economic opportunities. Mukwena and many others are determined to be agents of change. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Well, to discuss International Youth Day, we have in the studio joining us Raphael Abonyo. He is the director of the Youth Congress based here in Kenya. Thank you very much for joining us. As we were hearing there, youth unemployment remains a key concern across the continent. Why is this? Is it poor policies, poverty, population, poor skills? What do you put it down to?
I think it's a mix of things, and thank you for hosting me. But I think the youth unemployment is caused by a mix of things. First, we have a large youth population, a youth bulge, if we may call it that, because Africa is a very youthful continent, and so the large population of youth and the economy is not. Our economies are not growing as fast as the population is growing. Two, I think the policies that we have in place are not responding to the needs and concerns of young people. And three, I think is the issue of education. And unless we remodel our education to meet our development needs, then we'll continue having the problem of youth unemployment. But lastly, I think is the question of the issue of how do we invest in the private sector to be able to create jobs as fast as they are required. Because government, public sector cannot create the number of jobs that are required. So the private sector is where we should focus.
Well, that brings me to my next question, entrepreneurship. It's been long advocated as a potential solution. Do you see it that way? Is it likely to change anything if we do encourage more entrepreneurs on the continent?
Definitely. I mean, entrepreneurship is a possible solution, is one way of creating the jobs that we are required, but I think we must get the right formula of, promoting entrepreneurship. We must look at entrepreneurship comprehensively. First of all, we must look at the issue of capital that these young entrepreneurs require. We must also look at the skills that are required. We must train these young entrepreneurs. And through, we must look at the market, because what most governments are focusing on is the financial part of it, but they forget that these people need skills, and they also the need for market. So entrepreneurship is one way, one area, but it needs to be thought about comprehensively. But we must also invest in other sectors, not just entrepreneurship. Agriculture, for example, manufacturing, sectors that can create the jobs that are required for the large population of youth that we have.
Okay, let's talk about immigration. Do you think that Africa is doing enough to contain this?
Definitely not, because I think the push factors, lack of jobs, lack of opportunities for youth is what is driving many of these youth to leave the continent. And I think as a continent, we must think of how do we create jobs, how do we create opportunities, how do we deal with factors that are pushing youth out, to leave the continent, because it is not just a problem to countries that are now facing the challenge of hosting these immigrants, but it's also a problem for Africa, because we are losing skilled labor, the brain drain, young people who are energetic, dynamic, enthusiastic, they are skilled, but they're leaving the continent. We are doing sort of an injustice to the continent, and so we must start thinking of how do we create an environment where the large population of young people can get jobs, can get opportunities. But most importantly, we must realize that the population that we're dealing with is educated but jobless. So the jobs that we're creating should be jobs that can really match the skills, jobs that can match the qualifications, jobs of the 21st century. So it's not just creating something to preoccupy these young people. So the right jobs are also needed.
So finally, how do you see the future of young people in Africa?
Young people hold the promise, but unless we fix the challenges that they are going through, then it's going to be a huge problem for Africa. So yes, the large population in Africa is great. We are a youthful continent. That is a huge challenge, but it can also be an opportunity in terms of the skills, in terms of the creativity, in terms of the talent that these young people possess. I think this is something that, if well focused on and if well invested in, is something that can take Africa to the next level.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming in and giving us your thoughts on this. Raphael Abonyo, Director of the Youth Congress here,
Thank
based
you
in
so much
Nairobi.
for hosting
Thank
me.
you.
I deeply appreciate it.